All right. Back again with another episode. Episode number 67.
Roll that intro.
Yes.
That's what you wanted me to say last week, but
Yeah. You did. It was funny. You took a little while, but you got it. What's up, everyone? We're back again. Thank you for checking in with us again. We hope you are having a great week so far. Well, it's Monday, but I was reading some of the comments and responding, and I gotta say, some people just get upset at the smallest things.
Oh yeah, I stopped reading them. We don't even have a big following at all, and like people will find anything to like nitpick or get like, I don't know. There are times where we ask, oh, let us know, blah, blah, blah. And that's totally valid. Like, mutual responses are great. You know? A little educational response is great. But, like, chill the fuck out. There are some things where it's like, just don't watch.
Yeah. But same.
Like, if you're so pressed about that, you have the option to, like, click that little X button on the top of your screen and just don't watch it.
But for the other people who enjoy and respond and like and
nice.
Subscribe, and also that the ones that jump over to the vlog channel and subscribe, all of you guys are great. Thank you guys.
And we appreciate you.
And so just saying, don't forget to jump over to our vlog channel. And we got the Spain videos rolling, so hopefully you like those. So we went to go see one of Linda's and my favorite bands the other day. Was it yesterday?
2 days ago?
2 days ago, yeah. Yeah, 2 days ago. We drove like 2 hours to go see them. It's not usually a 2-hour drive.
It's just traffic.
Yeah,
That's
a lot of traffic.
what it was, LA.
But yeah, it was fun. We had a great time. So yeah.
Yeah, so yeah.
Today's video is a little bit longer video, but this is the guy that we did How the USA Ruined Bread. And I like his videos. It's like it's a little bit longer, but it's interesting. It's how the USA colonized the USA. And this is it's a big topic. I'd say in the past, it's been a big topic for a while, but I think it's been coming as social media more and more has been like talking about these things. Mm-hmm. I think that's where you start to see like more people are gaining the knowledge of like what really went on with it. Yeah,
you can see way beyond the veil now because you're not just...
Yeah, you also see how the textbooks in a lot of our schools...
Yeah, you're not limited to, like, your community of knowledge. Now you're, like, have the internet to kind of, like...
Yeah, which is good and bad because you can get wrong information. But then again, it's like if you look at some of the textbooks that only cover certain aspects of things... It's all
tailored to what they want.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Only know a certain amount. But I like the internet because... Sorry, that was annoying. Okay. But yeah, like you were saying, social media could be a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
You just have to do your own research.
Yeah. Yep.
And even then,
it's still
you're
hard,
limited.
But so let's see how this video goes. And for those of you that said we stop and talk too much, well, I'm sorry.
I like to talk. I'm sorry.
Let's begin.
This continent has some of the most dramatic landscapes on the planet, from the ocean shorelines to the alpine mountains and the sandy deserts. And also in this landmass from coast to coast and everywhere in between, there lived hundreds, if not thousands of different nations, tribes of people whose land this was. This was their home. But then others showed up to these shorelines in their boats. And that is when everything changed.
Wow.
In the spring of 1803, two American politicians visiting Paris closed the sweetest real estate deal they had ever seen. With the simple stroke of a pen, their country doubled in size. All for just $15 million.
Damn.
But in this deal, which was called the Louisiana Purchase, the US didn't actually buy this land from France. France didn't actually own the land. What the United States was buying was the imperial rights to this huge swath of North America. This basically meant that France would stay out of the way and let the budding new empire, the United States, colonize it without interfering. If the United States really wanted ownership over this land, they would need to get it from the people who were here first, which at the time was lots of different native tribes.
Damn.
These are the people who had been here for thousands of years, way before Europeans had the idea of leaving their continent. And this land that the US just bought was theirs. Oh, and this isn't just me, like some modern enlightened person looking back and judging the United States at this time. The US knew that this wasn't their land and that they were going to have to buy it from the people living there. And their big plan was to do things differently, not like the old imperial powers that they had just broken away from. In fact, George Washington was, quote, determined that the US government's administration of Indian affairs shall be directed entirely by the great principles of justice and humanity. Go USA, let's do this in the right way. So instead of conquest, they would negotiate and sign formal treaties with these native nations. Then they would pay them for their land, fair and square. After all, this was a country whose founding document highlights justice, tranquility, welfare, and liberty.
I mean, you have to think too, like, in the back of their head, they're probably thinking, even if these people don't agree for us to buy it, we're gonna kill them if they don't agree.
Well, clearly.
I know.
In our series, How the U.S. Stole, we get to see how the U.S. grew from a group of English settlers to a global superpower. But none of those stories would exist without this one. The origin story. The first thing that the U.S. ever stole. So Europeans are pouring into this newly formed country, the United States. And the government is making deals and signing treaties with the tribes, allowing these newcomer immigrants to settle on their land. At first, this is a fairly peaceful transactional process. The US would offer food, farming equipment, cash, the services of a blacksmith, all in exchange for ownership over this land. But unsurprisingly, a lot of these tribes had no interest in moving out of their ancestral lands in exchange for, like, farming equipment. And this is where all of George Washington's ideals of justice and humanity
they went out the window.
Really start to dissolve. The US was becoming a more powerful nation. They needed more land for their booming population. So the impatient settlers and their government started playing dirty.
The westward movement was like a great tidal wave.
You start to see what happens when these tribes say no to the newly powerful United States. In one instance, one group of tribes up near the Great Lakes didn't want to sell their land. They told the United States that this river would be the border and to not cross it, to stay off their land. The US said no, and they took them to war and lost twice. But on the third time, they won the battle and forced the tribes to sign a treaty giving away all of this land, basically all of present-day Ohio. Something very similar happened down here when the Seminole tribes refused to leave their land. The US military came in, another war, killing thousands, forcing the tribes to sign a treaty and pushing them into the swampy interior of the state, where they had no access to their farmland or the ocean. Down here in what was becoming Alabama, the Muskogee Nation refused to sign a relocation treaty, but not wanting to go to war, agreed to sell a portion of their land in return for a guarantee that they could keep the rest. And the United States agreed, and they actually did. And the Muskogee kept their ancestral lands forever. Womp womp, no, that didn't happen.
For a second, I was like,
a bunch
what?
of white settlers moved in, boxing the Muskogee out of their ancestral land. As tensions grew because of this violated agreement, the US military was called in to force the Muskogee out of their lands. No treaty was ever signed. I mean, the shenanigans ranged the whole gamut here. They would get tribal leaders drunk to trick them into signing this paper that gave them all the land. They would appoint random people to be the tribal leaders and then tell them to sign away the land for the whole tribe. In another conflict, the Sioux and Arapaho nations defeated the US military over and over until the US finally signed a peace treaty acknowledging their land. And they were safe. Until gold was discovered 8 years later, and the US broke their treaty, redrew the boundaries, built roads on their land, and before you know it, you've got a bunch of white guys with gold pans harvesting this land. Treaties and justice be damned. Eventually, other tribes caught on to what was going to happen, realizing that refusing the US government would mean violence. So they would sign the paper, take the money, and leave.
Honestly, I feel like this sense of like bullying,
it definitely is
still around today too.
Yeah,
Like we just bully people into
getting what they want. Pretty much, yeah. It's crazy to think though, like how much land natives had here.
Well, yeah.
And just I mean.
Anyway, sorry.
Course of almost 100 years, the United States signed 368 treaties with tribal nations, who were driven out one way or another to make way for white settlers, who established control over this land that their government had stolen for them. And yes, you have all the paperwork, all the spreadsheets that they were making, all the treaties, a nice paper trail. But this was all a facade of justice, a thinly veiled campaign for imperial conquest.
Yeah.
It's like justice for white people, and that's it.
Well, they make it look how they want to.
It's not even justice.
They make it look how they want to. Like, so I'm sure they're writing these things so that way down later on in a future time, people are like, oh, they did it like, or they tried their best to do it in a peaceful way, or
they
something.
chose to give it up, not.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Instead of taking it, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just like bullying. That's it. Kind of reminds me of our justice system, quote unquote. Like when people are getting interrogated, I know this is definitely apples and oranges, but like nowadays, like there's so many small towns where
they'll trick the people into saying what they want.
Like police departments have been exposed for like brainwashing people into admitting like crimes they didn't do.
A lot of the documentaries we see too, they know that they're like out of it, and so they'll say like, you did this, right? Like they'll say stuff like, you did
like
this,
the
right?
goal,
like, just admit it, you'll be fine.
There's no like ethical goal at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And like I don't get it. Sorry.
Before we go on to the story, I just need to tell you that we don't have a sponsor for today's video. Lately, I've been hearing from some sponsors that my videos are too political, which is kind of a bummer because we work really hard to tell really cool stories. And if that means that people don't want to sponsor us, that's fine. Luckily, we have a Patreon where all of you can support this work. It's called The Newsroom. We call it The Newsroom because it just sounds cooler than Patreon. But it is a place where you can support what we are doing, which is something more and more we need. On The Newsroom, you get an extra video every month. It's a behind-the-scenes vlog from all of the people and processes and happenings around here in the studio. You get to see my scripts. You get royalty-free music from our composer, Tom Fox, that you can use in your videos. And live Q&As with me. Members of The Newsroom get to chat with me on a Q&A where they can ask me anything. But more importantly, you get the warm fuzzy feeling of supporting independent journalism. And if that floats your boat, you can go to the link in my description, patreon.com/Johnny Harris. Let's get back to the story. Okay.
Kudos to him.
I was going to say,
letting money interfere with his message.
Because a lot of, if these things are saying that it's too political, that just means that you're probably you're scratching the surface of truth. Not scratching the surface, like it's already been there, but you're actually trying to be neutral on opinions and you're just saying what really happened.
Yeah, being neutral is just as bad as supporting the opposing side, in my opinion.
No. I'm saying he's being neutral without having like a bias of what happened.
No, I think that brands won't work with him or whatever, sponsors because they don't want their name attached to something that's
too political.
Right. But it's like, this to me is not detrimental.
No, but it's also
to your whatever.
Yeah, it just
their company.
It probably because a lot of these sponsors or companies have a lot of people who don't want this type of truth to be popular or out there as much.
They just don't want their name attached to it because everyone's opinionated, clearly.
Yeah.
And it could affect their business, but then it's like,
because clients might not like it.
Well, what really pisses me off though is when brands will latch on to a certain agenda for sales, but when it comes to bringing awareness to something, you're like, keep me out of it.
Well, because some of these corporations just come out of the limelight or whatever you call it, or like they'll pop out when something is now like being spoken about more. Right,
like Black Lives Matters or LGBTQ. Yeah, like people will slap their support on that when they need sales from those communities.
Yep. And they never give a shit before.
But but then when it comes to like our actual history, you're like, no.
Like fake treaty shenanigans going on to help the United States feel like they're doing justice. And it's working. They are moving loads of native people out of their ancestral lands so that white people can settle it. But there was one region that proved particularly difficult for this extermination project that was going down. Here in the Deep South, we had these 5 large nations that lived side by side with the settlers for a long time. They had all signed treaties with the United States that acknowledged their right to this land. Many of them spoke English, practiced farming, wore European clothes. Some even owned slaves. Because of this, these 5 tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee, and Seminole, were known as the 5 civilized tribes. And there's an alternative world where these tribes could have remained on their land, living side by side with the Europeans as they settled. But that's not what happened.
Imagine that.
Mostly because of cotton. Farmers down here were getting super rich off of a very valuable cash crop called cotton that they could sell to textile mills around the world. It was an industry made even more profitable by its key input: free labor from stolen Africans. There was this one strip of land down here called the Black Belt Prairie that was particularly desirable for farming cotton. But as you can see, it was locked up in what the United States treaties had formally acknowledged as belonging to native nations. But the farmers down here were looking at this as like, this is a perfect place to expand our cotton kingdom. So, these southern slave owners did what was kind of becoming US policy towards the people living on the land that they wanted. They made up their own rules. The state of Georgia was particularly aggressive in trying to clear this land out, or in the words of their governor at the time, to replace, quote, all of the red with white population. They targeted the Cherokee Nation, passing a law that abolished their governments. The Cherokee are not going to stand for this, so they fight back using the same shenanigans that the United States is trying to use, the US legal system. They take Georgia to court, a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And guess what? The Cherokee Nation won. There was no way around the fact that they had ironclad rights to this land, signed and sealed. The highest court in the country just ruled that the states could not impose on tribal sovereignty. But, as we all learned in government class, a ruling from the judicial branch only works if the executive branch enforces it. Oh, and who was in charge of the executive branch? Oh, this guy. The guy who wrote a letter to his wife during the War of 1812 from the battlefield saying that he had successfully slaughtered 170 Native Americans in, quote, an elegant style. Oh, and the guy who's on our $20 bill? Yeah, him. Andrew Jackson thought that negotiating treaties with the people who were living here was a ridiculous notion. So he looks at the Supreme Court ruling that validates the Cherokees' right to their land, and he literally responds in the snarkiest way possible, saying, "The Chief Justice, John Marshall, has, quote, made his decision. Now let him enforce it." No, he was not going to enforce it. Jackson had a different plan in mind. It came in the form of a new law that he pushed through both houses of Congress. His whole worldview towards First Americans embodied in a piece of American legislation, the Indian Removal Act of 1830. This law used...
I'm sorry. I remember certain things in history, but there are certain things that I forget. This was actually a law. That you remember learning about it?
I do remember. I remember hearing about it.
Indian Removal Act.
Yeah. Well, we can hear more about
it. That's crazy. Sorry.
It's fine.
Taxpayer money to get tribes out of the United States and to relocate.
I didn't learn about this in school. I learned about this on TikTok.
I figured. I was gonna say I don't remember learning about this in school.
This was a few years ago. I remember learning about this. See, TikTok's not that bad when you have the right algorithm.
Yeah, I know. When it's educational stuff.
Yeah. Or I have a lot of political shit on mine. But I can't remember why. There was this was getting pushed on TikTok a while ago.
Them to an uninhabitable place that surely no American settler will ever end up.
The Great Plains seemed an inhospitable land to people familiar with the eastern states and of Europe.
This became their dumping ground, and it came with a promise. Move here and we will never mess with you again. And what's crazy to me is that even after all of the shenanigans, all the facades, they continued to play this charade, saying that the nation of Indians may choose to exchange their land where they now reside. The law says that the government had to negotiate these treaties fairly, voluntarily, peacefully, and that the government would, quote, forever secure and guarantee them their new land, and that they wouldn't break any of the pre-existing agreements that they had made in previous treaties. But no, this was just more pretending. a paper trail of pretend humanity.
Yeah, that's
Just as Andrew Jackson had ignored the Supreme Court ruling, he had no intention in following the law that he helped create. But he kept up the ruse. More documents, more signatures, more paper that made these civilized, justice-minded people feel like they weren't orchestrating a mass ethnic cleansing, sanctioned by the government, paid for by taxes, but they were. So this law is implemented, and the United States government, military, and even private companies start to ramp up their removal efforts of first Americans. They focus in on these 5 tribes that were sitting atop the land that they wanted for their cotton empire. More bribes, more pretend negotiations, and when push came to shove, more threats of violence. The Cherokee eventually signed a treaty agreeing to sell their last portion of land, and they moved west, out to their little rectangle of land that had been allocated to them by the government on maps. The only problem was that the leader who signed the treaty on behalf of the Cherokee people was not actually the real leader. They had no authority to make this decision. The Cherokee chief furiously protested this, but the US didn't care. They had their signature from someone. In their eyes, all was justified. Wow. Between 1831 and 1838, nearly every member from the 5 tribes was expelled from their land. 100,000 people, whose home this was, now forced to walk by foot for more than 1,000 miles through brutal weather and terrain towards a little box on the map, a place they had never been before. The Cherokee would eventually call this journey the Trail Where We Cried, or the Trail of Tears.
I remember that.
Some tried to fight back against their oppressors, and others stood their ground until they were forcibly bound in chains by the US government and herded west at gunpoint. Their land was vacant, and cotton farmers with their slaves moved in, and the economy grew.
I feel like this is a part of history that people either acknowledge or they... Like, I've actually heard some people be like, well, I'm glad we took the land and I'm glad we did this because, you know, America, like, we made it what it is and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like...
But at what cost?
But how do you rationalize pretty much, like, forcefully either killing or moving these people out of somewhere that they have had their land for so many years? Their families were there. Their families had been there. Like,
yeah, they don't look at that. It's not ethical, Brian. Like anything, I feel like.
Yeah,
colonizing has never been an ethical thing.
The thing that's more annoying, though, I feel like, is because there was nothing to provoke this. Like, the Native Americans didn't do anything.
Well, they saw the land as an opportunity to make
profit
money.
off of. And
that was enough for them to say, well, fuck you.
That's wild.
We want,
My grandma's family was, I believe, from Cherokee. They were part Cherokee, and then I think they moved west, towards like Mexico, like Texas and everything like that.
I think Max farted.
Our dog farts, and it smells pretty bad. All right, let's continue.
We'll never know how many people died during all of this, how many lives were really destroyed. Some people say 3,000, other estimates say 15,000, but you don't need those numbers to see how destructive this was. It was systematic, it was documented, and it was enshrined in law. We have a paper trail of all of it, showing the receipts, the payments, the treaties, the bureaucracy of it all. It's like a bunch of spreadsheets from the 1800s. American settlers, in an effort to be different from the old world empires they fled, ended up carrying out the first state-sponsored ethnic cleansing. There's a reason why Hitler, 100 years later, references this exact event, this process, when he was carrying out his own ethnic cleansing. He said that the Volga, which was a river in Russia, would be, quote, our Mississippi. He said that Europe, not America, would be the land of unlimited possibilities.
Wow.
I had no idea that Hitler referenced this.
I mean, I'm not
event.
surprised.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's like he saw it as a way to like be inspired.
Yeah.
I guess in a way.
I'm not trying to compare.
No, they're both tragic.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to compare. Say one's more tragic than the other, but you don't hear as much about this one in detail as you do about World War II.
Again,
because our army fought.
Not only
against
that,
another
but
power.
they package it like this was their choice. Like we gave them somewhere else to go. Like You know, they don't. But whereas Hitler, it's like right in front of your face. Like he's sitting there saying like, we need to get rid of these people and kill them.
Yeah, multiple countries were involved and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, like these people, are demonic or and whatever the fuck he brainwashed people into believing.
Yeah. It's just sad, but I mean, that's why I feel like that's why so many Native Americans are. There's a huge there's huge community issues in Native American communities in United States. If you actually look into it, because I've seen other documentaries,
what do you mean?
And like a huge majority of them are alcoholics. They went through they have like this mental. A lot of them have mental problems. Yeah, and I have to think it's because this past that they were pushed out of all the places that they originally felt comfortable in.
Yeah.
And a lot of people here in certain places, they will not be friendly to Native Americans that are still living in those states.
Like on reservations and stuff?
That's what I'm saying. Like, or just in certain places where there's a really big like white population. Mm-hmm. I know that sometimes they will judge and be like rude to them. It's almost like they're trying to carry on what happened and to be
but those people are like, they're like that to anyone who's not white.
Yeah, but I'm saying like there's certain places in America where you have Native Americans and white people that see each other every day and are working day by day.
Yeah, a lot of states have reservation land and.
It just trips me out, or it's crazy to me that there's some people who like feel like they need to have pride in this of what happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like there's. Yeah,
we've spoken to people who are like, I'm glad we took over this land and stuff like that. Like it's crazy.
Insane.
I don't know.
Or like
the story of what happened to many nations of the first
not
Americans doesn't end here. In fact, this is kind of the beginning. We're going to make a second part to this video, and in that part 2, I want to show you what happens next once these tribes arrive to their little rectangle on the map. Indian Territory, the place where these tribes were forced out, dumped, and left to build a new life, and how they once again tried to fight back using the legal frameworks that had pushed them out, and how all of that led to the establishment of one state in our country that could have looked a lot different.
Texas. Probably. All right. That was a good part 1. I definitely want to do the part 2 when it comes out.
Yeah, me too. This just like shows that from the very beginning they will switch up laws and rules.
Well, especially at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, and
well, still even now.
I was going to say there's stuff now that like people have to dig for loopholes, and in our laws just to like make things just.
Yes, and a lot of times
there's so much brainwashing, manipulation.
It works in favor for the people who have spent their life knowing the laws and who can actually manipulate them, like the people in power, like in Congress and other stuff. Like they know that 95% of the people in our country don't know laws like to detail.
But the fact that Andrew Jackson can literally say,
I don't agree with this. Let me just change the law real quick to like.
Let me just create a fucking law out of thin air.
Yeah. That shit does still happen.
It's fucking nuts.
But I'm sure that wherever you guys are from, that probably still happens too with laws and stuff like that. I don't know how your guys' justice system is compared to ours. You can give details. But
off topic, there's a federal judge in Texas right now that's trying to ban abortion pills nationwide out here.
Yep.
Isn't that fucking crazy?
Yeah.
Like, anyway. Yeah, we do have to watch part 2.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this just came out, but I'll put the original. I like the way he presents his work, I guess you would say, or what I mean.
He really digs. He does
but it seems like he knows a lot. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Check this guy out if you haven't seen him, Johnny Harris. I'm sure a lot of you have because you guys recommended the How USA Ruined Bread, and it's by him.
That was
I also saw in some of the comments too, you guys were saying to do geography now. We'll look into that too. If you want to just put in the comments any recommendations for videos that you guys want to see, and we hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget.
Learning a lot. Yeah. I always sucked in history class, and
this is more interesting to learn it like this.
Yeah, and
you don't feel like he's trying to push a narrative of what happened. Yeah,
I don't feel like I'm being brainwashed.
Especially in Texas, the textbooks were different because you have Texas history and then you have U.S. history.
Texas is another planet.
I'm thinking that's what he's gonna say. How one state could have turned out way different. No. It's probably that one. Because there was a lot of natives. Like on the border of Mexico and Texas. But all right. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all right, loners? And also jump over to our vlog channel. We appreciate y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Peace.
Love you. Support you. Thank you.
Peace.